Okay, folks, and welcome to the DadBodBible's first podcast, Real Men Talk, where we basically talk to what I classify as real men about real men subjects, because simply men today have been put to a position in the society where we can't talk like real men. And because we can't talk like real men, there's an internal battle going on within us. We want to talk the way we want to talk, but we're scared to do so. Well, not here. Here, we're just going to get back to the real 1980s style of men without the sexism. So, Andy, how about you introduce yourself to everyone else?
Paul, thanks for having me on. I'm Andy Chapman from Limavady. Just coming up on 40 years old now, next month, and I run a BJJ MMA club in the town. I was a partner with CrossFit Limavady for 5 years, but we were getting really busy just before the whole lockdown thing started, and I needed to make a decision, so I jumped full time into the BJJ club. There's a lot of things about I love my job, the old CrossFit job, but I was up early in the morning. The alarm was going off at 4:30 every morning and stuff. And coming up to 40 years old, I was finished that, didn't want to do it anymore. So just made a call because it was sort of going between the two jobs. And like the whole CrossFit thing probably used to be my passion, but it's not that way anymore. Like I just love grappling. I love combat. All my thoughts in recent years has been geared towards that. So like the members in the CrossFit gym were, they pay a lot of money for membership and they're getting at the service of their coaches and fully invested in that. So It was time to make.
Well, here, just look at the photographs of the place. Your new place looks awesome.
Well, half of it looks awesome. The other half of it looks like. But like that's the great thing about Instagram, isn't it? You can show good stuff.
You can manipulate the things to look exactly the way you want it, make people jealous and make them feel like they're not worthy.
Well, the thing is, like, always in the back of my mind, it's like, when are we going to get a chance to open up? When are we going to be able to be offering a service again? So like I have that wee bit of time now to get the rest of the gym like up to shape and ready to go, because there's no way we're going to be open on the 5th of March whenever they're saying these lockdowns are ending. It's not going to happen.
What do you think? You're not going to be open, or we're not going to be open?
I think for contact training, it'll probably be a wee bit later than that. I hope I'm wrong. Sounds very pessimistic, but I just think the 5th of March will come and go, and it just seems to be the way it's been for the last year. Dates have come and gone, and things haven't changed, or else got worse.
Andy, what do you think of the whole? We have to talk about COVID because literally that's the only thing in everyone's mind because it's affecting everyone. You were a journalist for how many years?
12 years. Worked in New Zealand for New Zealand Herald for 3 years. Then I was a journalist here for 9 years as well.
And what do you think from your background and from your perspective? What do you think is the real story about what's happening here? Don't be afraid to speak your mind here, because this is the problem with society. We're too scared, and this cancel culture bullshit is just rampant. So I don't give a shit. I'm letting people speak their own mind, and if we disagree, we'll argue. But if we agree, we'll discuss it. It doesn't matter. It's about opinions, and it's about getting those opinions out. And
okay, so like going back to the start of last year, when we were seeing stuff from China and then moving on over to Italy and stuff, I think that I'll be man enough to say that I was a wee bit concerned at that stage as well, and I was worried about what was going to happen. And I think that the government sort of acted on people's fears at that time, which was definitely enhanced by the media perception of what was happening at the time. But the government made those decisions, and that was fair enough. So we're talking now the end of March last year. What happened then, I think, is that they carried it on, and I think that it was pretty obvious that things were going to start to get destroyed at the far end of it. But they'd sort of dug in, and they had to stick to their guns at that stage. And I think that the theory is that the only thing that's going to save this is the vaccination, and that's their sort of get out, because things will ease off now coming into springtime. I think because it doesn't matter what anybody says about science around the virus, it definitely seems that at the very least it coincides with the winter flu season. I think that we can say that it's definitely seasonal.
I think we can say, considering 95% of flu cases have died down this year. Like, there's just some anomalies in this stories that are just happening. Why have the government changed their opinion 64 times? Like 64 times, their whole idea behind what we should do has changed. It just doesn't make sense to me.
The other thing as well is like how you said that the regulations have changed 64 times. How are people even supposed to know what the regulations are if they're changing every 2 weeks?
I don't know.
Like, does a person have the opportunity to say, I don't watch the news, so I don't even know what's going on?
I don't watch
I
news
don't,
ever, simply because of this crap. But the one thing that gets to me, the one thing that I don't understand, and I'd seen this tweet earlier on, and I actually screenshot it because I knew it was going to come up, and it was a brilliant tweet. And the girl said, how can a plumber, electrician, decorator, cleaner, carpet fitter, kitchen washer, installation man, sky engineer, plasterer, tiler, etc. allowed in my house, but my mother, father, brother, sister aren't? You know, that that just doesn't make sense.
doesn't make sense. But I mean, like, at the end of the day, Paul, everybody's got their personal choice as well and their personal decisions. I haven't stopped seeing my family. I go up to my parents' house every Friday night. My kids are still getting hugged by their grandparents. At the end of the day, and I'm quite happy to say that. And you know the other thing about it as well, Paul? You see, if people actually posted up on their social media what they were actually doing, people would realize that people are living their lives as normally a lot more than what people think they are. And I know that for a fact because I talk to people away from social media, and I know that people are living their lives as normal.
Of course,
So
they
it's
are.
just everybody's playing this game and keeping it going.
But again, it comes back to the social media influence, the cancel culture. People are scared to actually admit to what they're doing because they're worried about the public perception and the ridicule they receive. And a lot of people aren't of that state of mind where they can handle it. I'm pretty lucky in the sense that I've been that sort of far left field, far right field opinion all my life. I just speak my mind and I don't care what anyone thinks. And I've taken a lot of abuse for it. But with that abuse comes resilience, like an armor. It just bounces off you eventually, and you don't give a shit because these people that they feel the need to scream and shout and do all this virtue signaling are usually the ones that are terrified and insecure themselves.
Do you know the other thing, Paul? And I was actually chatting to mate about it this morning at training. A big problem with what's happening now is a lot of people know that things don't add up. Okay, a lot of people know that. I would say more than 50%, more than half the people know that things just don't add up with us. But I would say of that 50% that know, there's maybe 25, 30% that are so bone idle lazy at the minute because they're sitting at home scratching their balls watching Netflix, and they're getting money put into their bank account every month, whether it's through government grants, whether they're getting furloughed or whatever. And a lot of people who maybe had shit lives before this even started are on the pig's back now. And if I was one of those people, I don't think that I would want things to go back to normal again. Not yet.
You've got to remember, though, a lot of people, the society we live in, not just this last year, but you think about the last 2-3 decades, we've been systematically conditioned to obey more and and we live in lives that we don't like, and we're in jobs we hate, and all of a sudden you're given the chance to not be in that job. You're going to obey the rules as much as possible, or be seen to obey the rules as much as possible. You're probably not obeying them, but you're going to support them publicly because you don't want to go back to work, and you've now adjusted to 80% or 65% or whatever it is of your normal wage. Your life has adapted, and for a lot of people, for all intents and purposes, they're getting a mini retirement, and because they're getting a mini retirement,
exactly,
UBI is going to come in.
You get instant. It's so easy to be lazy, Paul. It's really easy to be lazy, and like whenever you're chatting about 80% or 60%, whatever, like people aren't spending money anymore in it either because they're not eating out on restaurants. They're not spending money on fuel. People are a lot richer now than they were this time last year. But it's a false impression of wealth too. Like if you think about the way that the government's handing things out this year, they've borrowed almost £500 billion in the last year. Do people not realize that we're just about to hit a big fucking brick wall at the minute?
My best mate is an economist in the assembly, and I was just talking to him, and I just said to him, I said, how bad is it? And he goes, bad. And I was like, bad. And he's like, we are fucked. And he couldn't emphasize how bad it's going to be soon. And he's the guy dealing with all this, so he knows what's coming, and he's told me it's going to get and I think that's when people are going to realize, fuck, we've created this environment ourselves by just willingly capitulating to everything they've said without argument, out of fear again. This fear narrative that's been pushed over and over again.
Yeah, it's the other thing that whoever's peddling any resistance towards the narrative is really good at having people cancelled as well, because like you've got people like Dolores Cahill, who was one of the most celebrated virologists in Europe, or microbiologists in Europe. Like if you look at her CV, like she's one of the most educated people in the whole of Europe. They talk about like this sort of thing. Even people like Tony Robbins was coming out talking about it a few weeks ago. It's just got cancelled by everywhere. Tony Robbins was looked almost as like a godlike figure last year. But because he decided to speak out against the narrative, people are saying now that he's been irresponsible and stuff. So it's the hold that the media have got over painting people in a bad light for speaking out against the narrative at all. And like what Tony Robbins said was completely right. What he said, but if you look at all cause mortality across the world, it's almost identical to what it's been for the last 5 years. It doesn't show up that there's a massive pandemic. Now, people are dying like associated with COVID-19, but and this is using his words. I'm not like saying what I think, I'm just saying what he had said through his own research. Like despite the mortality rate being exactly the same, people that are dying with things like pneumonia, flu-associated deaths, even cancer is way down, and it's way down directly proportional to what the COVID deaths are up. Like if you can't look at that rationally and critically and say this deserves a conversation at least, then you're not thinking about it properly.
That's the problem. See what you said there, that sentence there, it deserves a conversation. We can't have a conversation because as soon as you have a conversation, you have all these scientific know-it-alls coming off with it. You don't understand the data. You can't read scientific papers. You just don't understand. We don't need to read scientific papers to see what we see with our own eyes. I think one of the biggest problems is that people, I'm not insulting all the scientific people because it's not, just there seems to be a first sway that the media like to latch on to and highlight, so it seems like they are the public opinion. But these people, they look at the COVID problem, it's like looking on jigsaw, and every piece of jigsaw is a different aspect of the problem. They're just looking at one or two pieces and trying to get the whole picture. And because they're looking at one or two pieces and they're given the voice, that's what everyone seems to think it is. But no one's thinking about the abuse going home with children and wives, and the domestic abuse happening, the starvation and the poverty that's happening, the cancer deaths, the treatable deaths that aren't getting treated because COVID has suddenly taken priority over everything else. And then you've got the media pushing this narrative, telling everyone that COVID, and no one's been given a voice to all the other issues that socially have happened for decades and need funding, need help, need a voice, and we're not getting that, and that's the problem. And I think that we need to be allowed to speak about these things at the very least.
Of course, like the other thing as well is, and maybe this is fair to balance it out. Like everybody's truth through their own reality. So if someone has a family member who's died there recently, labelled with COVID death, then I can definitely empathize and understand with their views and stuff. But my truth is my reality, and my reality is my two kids getting picked up in the house all day, and I can, like, my son's 5 years old, and I can see the frustration bubbling over in him. Like he wants to be at school. So like surely I'm entitled to my truth through my own reality, because that's all truth is. Like science isn't truth. Science is science. Science changes as well. Like science has changed since the beginning of time, but truth is your own perception of your own reality. And my reality is telling me that what's happening now is it's not right. It's not how humans are supposed to live.
I think if you're talking about science, and why, if science is meant to be the studying and consideration of all theories, because science is a theory, and then coming to the best conclusion, why are 100,000 doctors, nurses, and scientists, over 100,000, being ignored in the baritone agreement? Like, these people are just as qualified. Look, Mike Yendon, like, my God, the man has got more qualifications than any other scientist I know on this topic. But yet, because he doesn't follow the government narrative and he's speaking out against what the mainstream media want us to believe, it's now he's been cancelled, and that's dangerous. Yeah. That's a dangerous thing to happen, because that is a proper opinion from a scientific background that is not being allowed to be considered. That's dictatorship.
This whole, for me anyway, again, I need to be really conscious, because I know people as well who have lost people in their family in the last year, that like very few, albeit, but people who have had their death labeled with COVID. So like I'm always always need to be conscious of that. But like in the same breath, this pandemic for me hangs on a PCR test. The whole thing like either continues or falls on a PCR test. And if you're chatting about PCR, like Dr. Fauci, who seems to be the golden scientist involved with the whole pandemic, has said before that anything over like a cycle threshold on the PCR test of 35 is completely meaningless. It can't be used to diagnose anything. There's a freedom of information request put forward by a friend of mine in Derry a couple of months ago. He shared it on his Facebook page. Keelan shared it last month, and got a reply the Southern Trust, they say that the cycle threshold that they're using in the Southern Trust, and that's just one trust in Northern Ireland, I don't know what the rest of them are running at, is between 40. Some are being run at 40 and some are being run at 45 for a cycle threshold. Like, so with that freedom of information, you could literally blow the lid on the whole pandemic, or at least here in Northern Ireland. I'm sure it's not very different anywhere else. I tag journalists underneath his freedom of information post on Facebook, tag journalists, tag politicians, because it's a newsworthy story, at least to be looked at. It needs to be looked at. Nobody touched it. Nobody touched it.
It's almost like there's an agenda behind it, is there? But that's a conspiracy theory.
As I said, if you were saying at the start there of the podcast, I was a journalist for 12 years. I would have been loving getting my hands on stuff like that because it's a big story, but nobody's touching it. PCR cycle thresholds over 35 is meaningless. One trust in Northern Ireland said that the threshold that they're running on 2 different tests is 40 and 45. So the results from the PCR test within that trust are meaningless. That's according to Dr.
I think there's a lot of people don't even understand the difference between 35 cycles and 40 cycles. The difference in, like, you know, the particles, the per particle is massive. And I can't remember the guy's name who invented it, but they said, like, anything over 40, I think it is, it's meaningless. You'll find whatever you're looking for. Over 40 or 45 cycles, you're going to find whatever it is. And that's been proven in papayas, Coca-Cola, live on the Denmark TV. The journal or the politician found Coca-Cola positive. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
The other thing about that, Paul, and we'll just stick to PCR test when we're chatting about this. Like, you get all this bullshit on Facebook, like, oh, where did you get your virology degree? YouTube, blah, blah, blah. This is maths. This has been able to count between 0 and 45. Like, are we not able to read and understand what things are said now? You don't have to be a virologist to understand what we've just been talking about. The cycle threshold of a test is meaningless above 35, but they're being run at between 40 and 45. I don't need a degree in virology to understand that there's something wrong with that. And you know what else? A wee bit of common sense will tell you that there's something wrong if the media aren't looking to report on it. Because why are they not looking to report on that? That's a big story, but they're not touching it.
It doesn't make sense to me at all. None of this makes sense to me anymore. And what's frustrating and infuriating to me is how easily people are conditioned. That it's like, we have got the ability to stop this right now. If everyone came together and stood up and went, nah, enough, it would be over. Because we put those people in power, but we don't. We're too fearful. You've got people who are, like I said, we said furloughed, happy to do their job, happy to take the money and do whatever asked. You've got people who have got jobs who are being forced to get vaccinated by their bosses, which I think is leaving themselves open for a massive lawsuit down the line eventually. You've got
the thing about vaccinations, I don't really know what to think about that, to be honest, because, like, on one side you're hearing that you know, there could be immunity passports and stuff like that, but then on the other side you're hearing that, you know, it would be a complete infringement on a human right through natural law to force somebody to have an injection. I don't really understand enough about the whole immunity passports and stuff like that, but it just seems as if it sounds as if it shouldn't be allowed to happen. I'm not sure. Maybe, you know,
I was laughed at in May. I was laughed at because I said we're going to have vaccine passports in the next year or so. Everyone told me, oh, shut up, you're a conspiracy theorist. Now the same people calling me conspiracy theorist are the ones cheering for this vaccine to happen, this vaccine passport to happen, even though we're noticing death upon death upon death, abnormally high numbers of deaths from a vaccine, and we're reporting, I think Norway had 23 and some other country had 63 or something. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I think we're going down a dangerous path. And it seems to me that when you have governments who are signing contracts with vaccine companies say you will not be sued for any side effects that happen, that's an alarm bell for me.
Yeah, I think, you know what I think? Like, I'm not saying that you're wrong what you're saying, but as far as I know, that's the case with most vaccines, that they have immunity. Anyway, I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
Yeah, but the vaccine altogether, I'm just talking about anything. If you're putting something in the body that's making people multi-millions, billions of pounds, and if anything goes wrong, and it's being made law that you have to take it, and there's no comeback.
Yeah, well, the thing that annoys me about that, Paul, to be honest, is like the British government and other governments as well were putting, like, I think the UK government put 86 million into the Oxford research for a vaccine last year. That's a business they're putting money into. Yeah. So, like, what I want to know is, now that they're turning a profit on the vaccine that they invested, the British government invested in with their money, with our tax money, do we get reimbursed that money, or does that happen? I don't think it does. Now, the other thing as well is, like, the British government just recently announced they're putting £60 million in towards a campaign to advertise the vaccine and they stop disinformation on the vaccine. So what they're doing now is, after giving them the £86 million to fund the research into the vaccine, they're now giving them money to market their product for them as well. This is a private business.
It's ridiculous.
It's a private business. It's our tax money that's paying for that.
And a lot of the politicians are actually personally
There's nothing wrong there.
Sorry, you broke up.
One of the UK, it's not Woody, the other one, I can't remember his name, has like something like 600,000 in shares with the Oxford company AstraZeneca. So I don't know, man. See, I have said this from the start, Paul. Healthcare should not be private, or should not be like a privately run. It should be run by the state. Like, they should be running healthcare. And the pharmaceutical industry is part of healthcare. And whenever somebody can profit out of it, then health becomes secondary to profit. It's a human nature. Humans are greedy. It's just human nature.
And so what are you doing on a personal level? What are you doing to cope through all this madness?
Well, listen, for at the risk of being have the police knocking at my door as much normally as I can, Paul, to be honest. Now, I'm not being completely irresponsible either, but I need to make money. I'm not eligible for grants because my business was very new. So I'm making money, and I'm doing that through privates. And as I say, I see my family on a Friday and a Sunday. That's something that my mother wants to see her grandchildren. So I'm not going to stop her from doing that. Apart from that, frustrated for sure that I can't run my business and earn money and make a difference in people's lives, because I value the service that I provide, and I think that there's a lot of positives from it. So it annoys me that I can't provide that service. But I do have hope as well. I think that we are. What I think's happened is, I think that we're coming to the end, because I think that the powers that be know that people are right on the edge of just sacking the whole thing. I think it's already happened in Poland. I was actually chatting to a Polish friend, and he was saying they just started opening up over there, started opening restaurants, started opening their businesses back up. So all the regulations just regressed because they knew that they couldn't keep a lid on it anymore. So I think that the British government and the Irish government know that the people here are like really fed up now at this stage as well. Also, the narrative's starting to run out because the vaccine's being put into people's arms, and people are going to start saying, well, if this vaccine works, we need to get back to normal. If the vaccine doesn't work, we need to get back to normal, because we've basically just given away a year of our lives. So we've stopped living for a year in the hope that we're going to find immortality. And we all know that that's not going to come. So I think it's getting to the stage where people are just thinking we need to take a chance and get back to some sort of normality.
It's strange. 2020 is the year that everyone realized that they die. It seems to be like no one really realized they died until 2020, and the government paid the media just to bombard death on our doorstep daily. Why are we so scared of dying when we know death is going to happen to us all, every single one of us? And the reality is, I think it was your post that I wrote, is like the average age of death has risen in 2020. So COVID has actually extended people's lives in a way, in an ironic way, because it's what, 82?
I think through life, and the life expectancy stats, that they said that COVID wasn't taken into account, but life expectancy went up. Life expectancy last year was lower than the average age of death to COVID. So like there's different, like I do sort of understand this because it's what I studied at university. Like my degree was very quantitatively based. So I do sort of understand this sort of stuff. So like I don't have a Facebook degree in virology, but I understand how stats work. So like if all else was equal and the average age of COVID deaths was higher than life expectancy, you would expect that life expectancy would rise the following year. And people are dying the COVID on average just under a year over what life expectancy is. And I mean, that any death's sad, and I get that. And I know that people will watch this and think that I'm being irresponsible, but it's not me being irresponsible. It's like weighing up everything and making an informed decision from there. If I thought that there was any more chance of death, the COVID outside a chance of death anyway, because we're all going to die, then I would start taking, of course I would start looking after the people around me a wee bit better. But weighing things up, I think that living our life is a wee bit more important than locking everything down for a disease that kills us on average exactly the same age or even slightly older than we were expected to die anyway.
I think we also need to consider the social factors in this, and this is where you've got to have the balls to stand up and say these things. The people on the most part, and the vast part who are dying, are elderly and sick, obese, underlying conditions. And the people, if you haven't looked after your body, this is a virus that is going to scare you, especially with the narrative being pushed. So, and we've got to a point in society where we're lazy. Everything is done for us. And there's an obesity epidemic. I've done a couple of articles. I've wrote a few articles about this craziness and, how the ironic Piers Morgan calling out Anthony Turner the other day for highlighting the irony between a morbidly obese person demanding we wear our masks when they continue to shove their food down their body. And I understand it isn't just as easy as that, because there are traumas, and obesity is a psychological illness for a lot of people. But we need to accept that if you're not looking after your body, then you're actually directly responsible for that. And if you're expecting everyone else to comply to these legislations and rules because to try to see it to improve your life, when you're not doing anything yourself to improve your life, it's hypocritical as hell. Why should I and my children and my business and my family all suffer this because someone who isn't prepared to look after their body and do what's required? And ultimately, it comes down to the individual. Why should I have to pay for that?
You're completely right. I saw a post on Instagram a few days ago. I'm not sure who posted it, and it triggered a lot of people. It got a lot of the cancel culture attracted to it. But it was basically saying, unless, if you're just hanging out and waiting for a vaccine, if you haven't looked at how much water you're drinking a day, your nutrition, how you might supplement, exercise, you're not looking at any of that stuff as well as just hanging out for the vaccine, then you're doing it wrong. And the sad truth, and this is going to trigger people, I get that. I don't care. The sad truth is that there's a lot of people here in that boat. They're telling everybody else.
Do you know why it triggers them? It triggers them because deep down they know it's to be true. They know what you're saying is truthful, but it's more painful to look inside yourself and ask yourself, what can I do? Because when you ask yourself that question, then you're opening up the questions of okay, well, what am I doing wrong in my life? And that means I have to change my life. And changing is hard and it's scary and it's intimidating and it's much easier to order Domino's than it is to go try to find a recipe and cook a recipe and eat healthy foods. And you're addicted to these foods, and the fear of stepping in the gym or doing exercise is going to be traumatic for you because you've never done it before. So it's easier to turn around and blame the people like us who are not prepared to stand by and let our lives, and more importantly, the lives of our children be affected, because people need to realize this is not a 1 or 2 year thing. This is a plan. Well, in my opinion, it's a plan that's going to affect our children's lives and future generations unless something happens today.
I think, was it last week, Anthony Turner posted up it was like the cartoon picture.
Yeah.
The cartoon picture is probably a wee bit distasteful because it's a heavy woman, but she's in a wheelchair. I don't like the way they sort of drag down people with disabilities, but by the by, the message is that the big lady's telling the fit person in the photograph to wear a mask to look after her health. Anyway, Piers Morgan had, obviously he was into his cancel culture thing and started slating her. But this is the thing I wanted to chat about as well. Everybody seems to have short memories. People like Dolores Cahill, who before last year was one of the most celebrated microbiologists in Europe. Everybody now thinks she's a quack, and they're listening to someone like
that's the latest one. You're right wing.
Piers Morgan. Everybody knows his history as well, but now he's like a COVID savior. He put on his Twitter last night that nobody should be able to travel again unless they get the vaccine.
I see that.
He's now this COVID champion. Piers Morgan was one of the most awful men in the media in the UK, and I don't need to drag up his history. Everybody knows his history, or if you don't know it, look it up on Google. So all of a sudden, Piers Morgan, who was here, is way up here, and Dolores Cahill, who was a well-respected lady, she's way down now in the gutter. It's not fair the way the media can make or break you over your views on the pandemic.
Can you see a time coming soon where the media will be held responsible for the lies?
No, not at all, because not at all. I mean, a lot of, if you look back at the weapons of mass destruction with Tony Blair in Iraq, sure, it was the media that peddled all that.
But do you think society, do you think there's a lot of people, shall we say, woke up to the fact that the media is lying more? Do you think there's more people are starting to realize that everything being told is a lie, and because it's affecting so many of us, and we're watching so many of our lives being destroyed or hindered in some way, that there may be come a time where the media might actually have to shut their mouths and tell the truth?
Well, the media are not everything the media says, I guess, is lies. There's but everything has an agenda. I think that's important to know. Everything has an agenda. You're not watching something on the news generally without there being a reason for you watching it. It's simple as that. And that's why, and just on that same note, that's why so many things are getting cancelled and censored as well, because they're the things that you're not supposed to see. Like this whole thing about fact checking and censoring people. This only started after the pandemic. I never saw a fact check in my life before the pandemic started. Never seen anything fact checked. But now everything gets fact checked. That's against the media narrative. And it's the same with things getting censored, like YouTube pulling videos off. Like even I've told you before, I know like that you might be a wee bit more pro-Trump than me. I don't really like Donald Trump.
I don't like him.
Twitter, when he was the president.
Let me interview. I do not support Trump. I just think he's a better version of Biden. I think Biden is a fucking pedophile creep, and there's no way I'd want that man.
I'm not a Trump fan at all, but at the same time, he's the president of the United States. He shouldn't have been completely censored off a social media platform. That just shows you that the power, the world power lies now in big tech. It doesn't lie with people have this misconception that democracy says that the power lies with the people that you elect, and it's fair. The power lies with the people who dictate the narrative. And the people that dictate the narrative is way above government level. It's the people that run big tech and the people that run big pharma. And there's no shame. Like I will sit. I'm not a virologist, but I'll argue that there with anyone that wants to argue with me, and we'll go through it. Big tech and big pharma rule the agenda, not the politicians that we vote for.
100%, 100%. I think another one that's happened this year, and especially with me and a lot of my friends, I laugh at it, is your far right, your right wing. If you say anything that's against the current narrative, then you're right wing for some reason. Like logically, I don't like Trump. I think when you're the best you can offer a country is Biden and Trump, you're in trouble as it is. But there's no doubt in my mind, if I was an American, I would want Trump, because he's done exactly what anyone would want their leaders to do. He improved their economy. He got them out of wars. He created peace. He done things that you would want any world leader in a functioning, well-functioning society to do. And we knew what Biden was going to bring. Biden's going to bring more wars. He's going to bring more cancel culture, because he's done it with Obama for years. So I'm democratic socialist. If anything, I believe if you're sorry, mate.
Yeah, I would call myself a socialist minded as well. Like I've always had socialist views. But the narrative is decided that I'm right wing in the last year, which I'm not comfortable with being. I'm not extreme right at all. I've never been like that, but it just seems that because I have a certain view on the response to the pandemic, that I've been thrown in that bracket. But hey, listen, there's nothing you can do about it, really. Like,
but I think, like, realistically, if we want a society to function the way society should function, then those who earn a lot of money should by default pay a lot more tax if taxes is going to happen. And those taxes need to be funneled in to the things in society we need: healthcare, education, looking after the elderly, all the things that we need to happen, but aren't, because they're being sold off and they're being privatized. And then we're getting paid, like the NHS. The NHS is not overrun; it's underfunded. Yeah. Like that. Let's call a spade. The government, who are now being held as saviors somehow, they're the reason why we're in this position. And if maybe I am a conspiracy theorist more than most, but I would say, like, this has been planned. And for the last 10 years, they've been cutting the NHS in preparation for something like this to happen. Because now it gives us a perfect agenda to implement these laws that need to happen. Because if they're properly funded NHS, we wouldn't be worrying about the overrun. And why are we paying nurses and of agencies triple the amount a normal nurse gets? How can we afford that? If we're struggling for staff, why not just employ more staff? Why give it out to an agency who's charging triple the amount a nurse gets paid? Like, I know friends who are nurses, and they went to agency staff because they work 2 or 3 days and they get the equivalent of a week's work on an NHS nurse's wage. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Again, like there will be people that watch this that have a completely different view on things like the pandemic and stuff like that. But I would want a person with a steadfast view on the narrative to answer this for me. The PCR test is a waste of time, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about that. Lateral flow test should have been the way that this should have been run from the start. They used lateral flow tests in the first week of mass tests in Liverpool. Nobody was testing positive. And they changed it for PCR, and then it shot up through the roof. The government has spent £100 billion on PCR testing. Why could that £100 billion not be put into combating the virus at any level? Why could that not have been done? That could have been done to resources. It could have been done to staff, and we could be out of this by now if the NHS had that money to tackle the virus, but it was put towards faulty testing. And that's faulty testing on the government's own admission. The ministers have said it right the way through the summer about the false positives and stuff like that. And I see people commenting under some of your posts talking about positivity rates and bullshit like that.
We both know you're talking.
And we're not scientists, we're not virologists. But we keep getting told that the PCR test is useless at diagnosing illness over 35 as a cycle threshold of 35. We know what it's being run at. So the tests are meaningless. And I'm sure that there's people who are very sick that are testing positive, but there's so many more people that are just numbers to be added to cases to fuel a narrative. Like I don't think that I'm being overly controversial in saying that, because I can cite government ministers that have said that over the summertime about the false positives and even the cycle threshold. And I can show videos of Dr. Fauci talking about cycle thresholds as well. They'll probably be taken off the internet in the next few months, but they're there.
Yeah, like I know this video goes up on YouTube. It's going to be down within 3 days, and I'll probably get a strike. But it's crazy that we're in a position in society in 2021. We were meant to be the most advanced we've ever been in our world, that we can't allow people to have their own opinion. This only happened in 2020. Why were flat earthers crazy? The Earth's flat. Everything else is round, but the Earth's flat. They have been allowed to have their opinions for years. Now it's not allowed to have it because it's not true. It's not factually true. We've come to this point where it is becoming like a digital Hitler burning the books. It's literally it's like the Nazis burning the books. Where if whatever you say, if it doesn't in the history they want us to remember, it's not going to be allowed to stay.
Yeah. The thing about the pigeonholing of it as well is that any form of critical thinking over the narrative associated with the pandemic, if you have any form of critical thinking, you're put in, like, you're a flat earther as well. If you're part of all the same conspiracy theory pigeonhole. So like, and it's the same thing as the far right. You're almost like a KKK flat earther, just because you might think there's something up with these PCR tests. You're banged into that box straight away, and like you're shut away and you're cancelled. That's absolutely scary, Paul, that's happening. And surely people can see that.
And surely people can see the fact that so many people are losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, losing their lives, but yet the top 1% have made how many hundreds of billions in this last year? Yeah. That alone makes you question, like, why are these people being allowed to make so much money? Why are like a Costa allowed to open up, but smaller cafes aren't? Do you know, there's so many. Here's the reality. And I've said this numerous times, the stats said, whether it's true or not, I don't know, I could be wrong on this, but the stats that I read said that supermarkets and secondary schools and primary schools were the 3 biggest spreaders of COVID. Why were they allowed to stay open for so long? When the reality is, we furloughed how many hundreds of billions have we spent on furlough? It could have been very easy for them to go, okay, supermarkets closed. The government are going to help the big supermarkets fund to get more vans on the road. We'll need more people to work the back end of the internet. So you're going to create employment. The food will be delivered. Schools will be closed. And instead of having the schools open, what we'll do is we'll ensure that every house with a school-age child will have access to the internet and access to the computer. We'll do online learning, and we'll close the places that are spreading the biggest cause of spreading down and prevent that happening. That could have been easily done with the amount of money being spent, but it wasn't. Instead, what happened was we let the big conglomerates stay open, and we'll close all the small businesses, the ones that are going to struggle, the ones that, and then all of a sudden those people were creating an environment of stress. And I don't think people give enough credit to how stressful our world is and what stress does. And it doesn't have to be massive stress. Remember, we evolved as a species to have acute stress. There's a saber-toothed tiger chasing us, run like fuck, get up a tree. Once it goes, we're back to normal. Now we've got this like chronic stress where everything is just keeping us in a stressful state. It's suppressing the immune system. A suppressed immune system means we're easily open to a lot more infections. And what's killing us right now? An invisible enemy called COVID. They can make up any lie they want. They can tell us anything they want, and we can't prove it because it's invisible. There's a new strain. Yeah. Every week there's a new strain coming out. What about the Limavady strain? How's that coping?
See, I'm not prepared to say that COVID's back because I don't know. I don't know for sure. What I do know is that
I'm sure my opinion
doesn't add up. Like the all-cause mortality rates in comparison to, but I don't think that anybody can argue that some deaths have been redesignated COVID. I don't think that anybody can argue that. Like I don't think that the truest COVID supporter or narrative supporter could argue that at least some deaths have been redesignated. And I want to know why that's happening. Like that's what I want to know. Your friend Andy McKenzie made a brilliant point a few months ago. He put a post up. If this was a real pandemic, the response should be all rates, rent, payments, all your standing orders are all frozen completely for 2 months. Okay, everybody's put on like food supplies. Everybody's wages stop. That's including politicians. Everybody gets a flat base rate. Your essential workers aren't people that work in certain types of shops. You're
frozen there, mate. Your Limavady internet isn't working.
There's so workers that aren't essential workers, and everybody gets the same sort of flat rate pay. Everybody gets everything cut exactly the same. Everybody's treated exactly the same. That just wouldn't happen because there's too many people making too much money out of this.
This is the problem. I think it's not people's fault. I think we live in a society where we've been trained that we need safety. We want safety. Everything's fearful. Terrorism, there's obesity, there's disease, there's unemployment. It's stressful and it's fearful. And we've been conditioned to just be willing, for most of them, they're willing to give up freedom for this semblance of safety. And the governments and the media are using that to their advantage to push this story continually. And people are living in fear. Like, I can't believe we're living in an environment or a society where people are willing to believe the government, who have been proven to lie this whole time, and phone the police on their own neighbours. It just shows you where we're at, society. What we don't actually have a community base. And as humans, that is one of the most important things we need. We evolved in a tribal society. We've lost the community. It's come to a point where the only community we've got is found within our four walls, the nucleus family. It used to be your village was your family. If you disappeared traveling, everyone knew you were gone. And when you came back, everyone welcomed you and you had this sense of belonging. And I think right now, because we need to live in this belonging environment, because that's who we are, we're humans. When it's been removed, we're scared, we're fearful. It goes back to that predatory idea. You can't sleep because the lions might kill you. We're so stressed that we're living in permanent stress, permanent fear. And we're quick to fight, we're quick to judge, quick to fight. Like anyone who knows me knows that I speak my mind and fuck it. Arlene Foster and Michelle O'Neill already know that. And we need to just get to a point where we'll love each other, where we can forgive, but we're being conditioned to fear that. The words love is frightening now. It's like people are laughing at you for that. It's insane.
For every day in the last 10 or 11 months, for every day, if you watch the news, you're being told as soon as the news starts how many people have died with COVID. Like that's being put into your head every single day. Death, 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 death. It's no wonder people are scared, man.
I actually pointed out CNN were doing that every day until the day Biden got inaugurated. And the day Biden got into power was the day CNN stopped putting up the daily death count.
But you know what's going up now every day? The numbers of people that have been vaccinated,
because they want
so many vaccinated by today.
Because
anybody who doesn't think that this is in some way a huge big pharma agenda, they need to start thinking about things differently. You add up the dots and you just get frustrated because you know that it's not all that you're being told it is, and it's frustrating, man, because you're literally putting your reputation on the line with some people. Do you know what I mean? And like I live in a small enough place, so do you. And like when you're running a business, people's opinions matter because it doesn't matter how good a service you provide. We live in like quite a fickle world where people attach themselves to other people's views, and it can get very difficult for you straight away. So it's hard to put yourself out there and stand up and talk and say a lot of the things that you know that other people think, but they're not saying it. And I've had people say to me, Paul, Joe, I don't know how you say that stuff online. Like people would agree with you, but they don't put themselves out there. That gives me hope that people, like, there's more people that know that there's something else going on, but they're not talking about it, because sooner or later, man, people will get pissed off.
I agree. Like I'd be one of the slightly more outspoken people in the sense that I don't fear what I'm saying. And here, I know it's costing me probably some customers and everything, but to me, this is more important than a business. It's more important than offending a few people. The reality is, it's our children that are going to be affected. Our lives are being affected, but I'm 43. I'll be lucky to have another 40, 50 years in this world. And 40 years goes in very quickly, as I've discovered. But my kids, they're 7 and 3 and 4, just turned 4. So they're here for the long haul, hopefully. And it's the world we're leaving them. And that's why I'm sort of going, fuck anyone's opinion. I don't really care, because I'm seeing what you're saying, what I'm seeing is two different things. And the way you're screaming about COVID and the things have to be adhered to, I am seeing your adherence as one step closer to complete control by government, a communist state, a fascist state, whatever way you want to think about it. That's what I'm seeing coming, because all they need to do is create some sort of like emergency, and then they've got powers to implement. And it's very easy to create an emergency, as we've seen. Like in March, like we talk about this, in March last year, or April, this time, February last year, we were seeing people in China on the ground being carried away dead with masks on them. That's what we were expecting. We were expecting a pandemic of that level.
It's definitely I'm saying the fascist communist thing. Fascism is very much associated with like national pride, nationalism, and you can sort of see like regimes that have been linked with fascism before, very nationalist minded. I would say communist, globalist. There is a globalist agenda. That's why things like the attention directed towards things like the World Economic Forum and things like that. There is shacks and moves being made. There's no doubt about it. Whether or not the virus maybe push that on faster, or maybe there's more to it, I don't know. I'm open to everything, and this is what annoys me. Like I'm not completely closed-minded about it. I'm open to hearing different things and making my own mind up. What I'm seeing in my head now is that the level of attention towards the tackling the virus is nowhere near the level of threat that's actually a reality because of it, and that's how I'm making my decisions.
The way what you just said there, the level of effort,
the level of media response and government response to the virus is nowhere near proportional to the level of threat that the virus provides. That's how I see it.
I would say that the level it's being promoted at compared to trying to tackle it is different. Do you know, if we put the same effort into tackling it as they do into promoting it and creating that fear, there would be no pandemic anymore. Yeah. It just wouldn't happen.
Chatting about it earlier, 100 billion pounds on faulty tests. 100 billion pounds is something like 85% of the national budget for the NHS. That's wages and everything. 85%. 85% of the annual budget on the full running of the NHS was directed towards PCR tests.
What I can't understand is the amount of Nightingale hospitals that were created to cope with this demand, and yet none of them were actually seeing any patients.
Sorry?
I said the amount of Nightingale hospitals that were erected to deal with the overflow of COVID, but yet none of them were used. Yeah. I don't understand that at all. I think London had like a £21 million Nightingale hospital that never seen one patient.
Yeah. Well, you see, the narrative rationale behind that is that there wasn't the staff to staff hospitals to be closed again. But in Northern Ireland, they brought in army medics to ease pressures on the NHS because so many of the NHS were off on isolating on positive tests. So why would that rationale not being used to staff medical hospitals? Because the military in the UK is pretty big, and there's a lot of arguments. So I mean, it's a bit of a dull argument. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense.
The thing is, what I notice about you, Andy, is you're very shall we say, on the fence, but not in an offensive way. You want facts. You're a questioner, and that's good. I love your attitude towards it. I'm just like, I speak my mind, and a lot of times I'm wrong, but I don't care. I speak from an emotional point. A lot of times I accept that. You're very rational in your thought process, and you're very on the fence. You try to take everyone's side, everyone's opinion into your thought process, and then come up with your own opinion. Why are people like yourself being ostracized for doing such? I don't understand it. Why someone who just questions people, which is what you should be doing, should be allowed to ask questions freely. Why you're being made out to be like this crazy conspiracy theorist?
Well, the programming's so good, that's why. The media programming's so good. Like this, it's been programmed to think that anything you do outside the regulations is putting people's grannies at risk. And that's what the people were saying before Christmas. Like Tom Black had been saying that before Christmas. I remember listening to Stephen Nolan, and it was like on the mouth of Christmas, ask a question, how many people are you going to kill this Christmas? That's the bastard. Well,
no, he's an absolute bastard, because he is creating more problems, more fear, and more division than anyone could ever hope for, because the evilness and the vileness coming from his mouth is insane. And it's just creating division in an already divided society. Remember, we live in a society that could quite easily go back to old ways. It wouldn't be that hard to do. And he is just creating that division.
Well, what I see is that saying that is very irresponsible for somebody who gets paid by the public. He works for the BBC, so he's getting paid. It's their money that's paying his wage. It's just a very irresponsible thing to say. I don't want him to catch COVID.
I genuinely don't care about him. I think he disgusts me. I won't hold back. Fuck it. I really won't hold back. He disgusts me. He's and you know what? Here I'll say something even worse. You know why he's like that? Because he's so fat. He is terrified of losing his own life, and he thinks that everyone should be respecting him and doing what he wants. If he lost the weight, and he's been in an eternal battle. I know my friend Pete him, and it was a nightmare. I can't stand him. But if he lost the weight, he would not be the way he is. He's living in a world of fear, because he knows that everything he's done in his life has led to the point where he is a candidate to be killed from this virus. And it's fear narrative. And if
I don't know that, because I haven't spoken to him, so I don't know if that's right. Like, what the stats would say.
That's my opinion. I would say that's my opinion.
What I would say about Stephen Nolan is that he thrives on polarization. And before COVID, it was like very sectarian. Like, he loves it. He loves his listeners, his viewing stats and whatever thrive on sort of like Jeremy Kyle, man. He takes advantage of vulnerable people for his own gain. Like, I don't mind saying that. I don't think that's overly controversial. He thrives on polarization. And in a country like Northern Ireland, it's not conducive to good relations at all.
And that's the thing. If you notice everything in society, we're being brought down a path of division, continuous division. And like everything that happens in this thing is about dividing society. You know, the masks weren't needed. In fact, we were told masks weren't going to be needed at all because they were pointless. Now they are because the fear narrative was waning. People weren't as scared. So you needed that visual representation to wear the mask. There's no studies to show that masks work. There's lots and lots of theories, but there's as many theories, as many points saying the masks don't work as say do, but yet it's only the ones that do that work that are publicized, and the ones that say they don't work, they're hidden and no one gets to read them, no one gets to see them. And I think then you've got the social distancing.
Well, the thing that annoys me about the masks, Paul, is that people supporting the narrative will come back and say, well, this is new science in relation to a new virus, but right, there's been studies into viral transmission of coronaviruses for 50 years, so it's not new. It's a new strain of a virus that's been around for decades. So, like, coming and saying that, you know, it's new science coming out is just complete nonsense. There's been coronaviruses in the air for a lot longer than I've been alive, and longer than that as well. Longer than that they've been reported. Like, there's science that suggests that the Spanish flu was an early form of coronavirus, but there's no like proof or anything on that, but it's a theory, just the same as the theory on masks are useful and social distancing. It's all theory.
Did Fauci not say that the
Yep.
Spanish flu, that it was like the mask wearing caused most of the deaths in the Spanish flu? Or am I mistaken about that?
Sure, I'm not sure about that. What Fauci did say early on in the pandemic was that that general wearing of masks wasn't going to be useful against the virus. He's went on record saying that.
So did David Whitty. He also said the same thing, that masks were pointless.
Yep, that's right, early on. But again, the media or the official narrative on that is that they wanted to prioritize masks for NHS workers. I'm just giving you what.
Yeah.
I'm just
by saying that, what they're basically saying is like, your life wasn't as important then as it is now. We didn't care if you died. We wanted to save the NHS, so we didn't care if you died because we lied to you just to stop you wearing masks. That's the other side of the coin then.
Again, their argument would be that, if NHS workers were all dead, nobody would be able to treat anybody. I'm just giving you, I'm just being
yes, I get you. I get you, mate. I know what they're saying. I know what they're saying. I just think it seems to be that like this focus on just this one point and forgetting about the rest of society and all the other things that function society needs is creating more problems than we realize. And because it's not being reported, no one knows about it. Like you were talking earlier on about your kid, your 5-year-old who's going nuts. Same here. We've got me and my partner, we've got 2 kids each, and we're lucky in that 3 of the girls are like Sive and Lucia are exactly 1 day apart with age, and then Evelyn, my one, she's 4, so she hangs about. But Rory, the 9-year-old wee boy, he's lost. He spent all his time on the Xbox now just to communicate with his friends, just to have some sort of socialization with his friends. But that alone isn't good. That's not good either, because being on the internet all day, on the Xbox all day, it's creating a problem in itself. And we're going to see this in the next 2 years. I'd say you're going to see a lot of proper depression, a lot of proper things happening in young children that shouldn't be happening. We're meant to be out exploring, we're meant to be out playing, we're meant to be out socializing. Play is one of the most important aspects of childhood, and we're being deprived of it. And listen, we're into February, it's midterm, another 6 weeks, and it's Easter. Then you've got another 3 months, you've got summer. So that's another year of schooling they've missed already.
No, you're 100% right. Like, going back to like NHS workers and stuff like that, it's just in my head as you were talking about your kids, and you're right about your kids. Both mine are in the band, and it's just not fair because they can't get our full attention all the time as well. Like my wife's a teacher; she's working all day. I feel sorry for them, but I think, and again, this overviews the virus as well a wee bit, is that the interpretation in the media of the virus has been very emotional or qualitative. Like they talk about, it's very emotionally driven. My going through university, everything I did was very quantitative, so it was all statistical. Statistics would have been what I would have looked at and determining things.
What was it you did as a university?
I did my undergraduate in politics and then my master's in social policy, so 2 very quantitative degrees. NHS workers dying to COVID. Like we had been told in the news that so many NHS workers had died with COVID in the last year. What I want to know is, and like I can't find this information, I want to know how many NHS workers have died of all-cause mortality in the last year, and compare that to last year before that, and then 5 years before that, and then we can get an idea of how serious it is. Like looking at it comparatively, I think last June there'd been a report put out that caused a lot of fear, and it was London bus drivers. Something like 26 London bus drivers had died with COVID. But if you look at that more deeply, there's something like 43,000 people employed in the London as London bus drivers, and it's somewhere between 20 and 30 die per year anyway, and have done. So what I'm saying is, it's very easy to manipulate statistics to drive the narrative. Say 30 NHS workers died in Northern Ireland last year with COVID. How many died in 2019 who were NHS workers all cause, and compare that to how many died in 2020. And then you'll start to understand if there's been any redesignation of deaths. It's important to do that, and it's really hard, Paul, to get those statistics to compare. Really hard.
I would think you'd also have to consider also about the bus drivers is it's a sedentary job. How many of those guys, how many of those men are healthy? How many of them underlying health problems? How many of them are obese or overweight? Do you know, there's factors that need to be considered, and they just can't. But the media don't do that. The media just highlight the like the headlines just to create the fear, and that's the problem. And we're being conditioned for so long just to clickbait that this is what we do now. You know, we don't even question. We just see the news, the headline, and then associate that with what we want to believe.
Yeah, and like care homes is a big one, Paul. So many people have died in care homes of COVID-19 this year. Like, I don't mean to be very brash, but care homes is a place where people die all the time.
This is the problem. Why can we not have rational conversation like that? Like, you go into a care home, yep, you're probably coming to the last 5 years of your life. Shall we say that's a good estimate? You're probably going to last about 5 years in a care home, and then that's it.
But again, what I would be looking at in care homes is I would be looking at how many people died of COVID-19 last year, how many people died in total in care homes, and then start comparing it to previous years and see if there's much of a difference. Look, I'm not saying there's not a difference or there is a difference, but I would like to see it, and the stats are really hard to get.
Was there not an argument as well that the government pushed those with COVID into the care homes, back into the care homes, and reinfected a lot of those people?
That did happen in the first wave. That's not a conspiracy at all.
But here, you'd be surprised, because when I say that, I'm laughed at and I'm told to wise up.
That's in the media. But that did happen. The people that were taken to hospital and then were sent back to care homes. And this is why I'm not prepared to say that the whole thing's a hoax, because there is a period of time last year at the end of March, beginning in April, where there was a spike, and that spike did reflect all cause mortality from the same period.
Hold on a wee second. Would it not be able to argue, that was because the virus was new and no one had built up the immunity for this, and obviously those sick and vulnerable are going to get there. But it's like being a normal coronavirus, like a flu every year, like a cold every year. You get the cold because it's a new form of cold, and then you get the immune system back up, and you get the antibodies. So that was obviously going to happen. The government have to hold themselves responsible, because they pushed the sick into care homes where there was more sick and vulnerable elderly people. There was the Nightingale hospitals. Why were they not put in the Nightingale hospitals where they could have been contained until the COVID vaccine or virus had passed? There's so many questions that just people are not answering, and people, when I ask them, I'm laughed at. To me, that's it's mass murder. The government are guilty of murder.
People will argue on the Nightingale hospitals, again, just what I was saying earlier, they'll argue that it was not a problem with the hospital beds. The problem was resourcing and staffing the hospitals. But that argument doesn't stand for me, because if army medics are able to be pulled in now, there's no reason why they couldn't have been pulled in. This was a serious pandemic, as serious as we're told, where millions and millions are being spent on Nightingale hospitals to bring beds in. Then it's just common sense that the army medics would have been brought in back then. I don't know why that. The Nightingale hospitals in the first wave, part of that is telling me that it's a public relations exercise to put fear into people. That's what I honestly believe.
Yeah, and here you're coming from a point where you've got a valid reason to think this. You were in the industry, you're in journalism for 12 years. You know how it works. You know the inside scoops of how things work.
I remember reading an article in I think it might be the Guardian or the Express, and it was mid-March, and they had run an exclusive story on a mortuary, a makeshift mortuary that was created right beside the Nightingale Hospital in London, that was the size of 3 football fields. Like, how can that not scare people?
Let's go local. Dundonald Ice Bowl was being turned into a morgue, makeshift morgue. Remember in March, they were going to turn it because they were expecting 12,000. I remember, funny enough, when it first happened, when the gyms were all closed, there's an old guy walks up and down our street, and I remember looking at him, and he is just messed up. Like, this guy's on his last legs. And I looked at him and I was thinking, he's probably gone. He's going to be one of the victims. And then I was thinking, what about mum and dad? Are mum and dad going to be gone? And then this fear, it scared me. Like, I was going to Gail, what are we going to do here? Like, am I going to die? I'm 43. Jesus Christ, I'm getting to that point where maybe it is going to affect me. And I can remember having a serious point of fear. That's why I got so angry, I think. And that's why I got so fucked off and so pissed off that I spoke out so much and so firmly about it. Because they have created fear, and they did put fear into me. And I'm the type of guy that can handle that shit, but it scared me. So what's it going to be like to someone who's a lot weaker minded than me and is conditioned by the media, conditioned by the TV? The most vulnerable are the elderly. The elderly are terrified. They're being forced to live alone, lonely, die alone, because of a narrative that's been pushed for the last year. how can you say you're protecting the elderly if you're forcing them to live alone, without family, without love, without communication, without hugs and kisses from the grandchildren? That is what elderly people live for.
You're completely right. And I was the same, Paul, at the very start. I mean, I had seen all those same photographs too, of the people lying dead in the streets of Wuhan. And like, just on that, the average age of death of this virus worldwide is 83. This was young men lying dead in the streets in Wuhan.
Yeah.
Young men lying dead in the streets with their masks on.
Masks on, exactly.
Yeah.
And the fumigation, the big videos of the fumigation happening, this the industrial fumigating machines just pumping this white gas all over the streets.
Yeah.
It's insane, mate. I don't know. What do you think then? Let's finish off with this. What do you think's going to happen? Let's go 12 months down the line. What's going to be happening?
Well, there's definitely a potential that the narrative could go along with new strains for vaccinations. I've always said from the start that I am very wary of profit in the health industry. I've always been wary of that. Same with things like my mother and sister both had cancer, and I've looked into this stuff for years. And I'm not happy that people can profit from healthcare. So for me, there's very real opportunity for big pharma who have a lot of control in the world. They push the narrative that we need immunized, 2 times a year. So it could be that we're put into lockdowns now for God knows how long to push new vaccines. Maybe that's complete tinfoil hattery. I don't know. But it makes as much sense as anything I've heard in the news.
I was watching a a quick YouTube video of a barrister who was saying that it's impossible. They can make us have a vaccine. They can't mandatory make us have a vaccine, but the actions they're taking to prevent us, to make it more appealing. If you want to live a normal life, you must get the vaccine. That alone is criminal. It's like going back to the Catholic Protestant of the 60s days, or the 60s in America, black and white. If you're not obeying what we want, then you're not a functioning member of society. You're a danger. Therefore, you can't do what you want to do. And the only way you can do it is by obeying our law. That is totalitarian state, in my opinion. That's like communism. That's whatever you want to call it. I know you said fascism is about national identity, but I'm talking about just the simple control of the people.
Well, there's definitely elements of fascism that you could tie in with like censorship's a big part of fascism.
Yeah.
Censorship's rife at the minute, but I would take it more to extreme communism. Like how I see the potential for the world in 10 years is how China is now.
When you look at the ties of China and America and the control China has in America and the world economy now, the amount of like infrastructure they own and the amount of land they're buying up in America, to me, and then if you want to go real conspiracy level, the amount of links between the government in America and China, it's frightening. It seems to be that that's exactly what's coming. The social scoring systems and the having the cameras everywhere, knowing your exact move, your every move, the fear of you can already see it. It's diluted down now, but speaking out against the government you're being orchestrated for it. How long before that becomes you're taken away for it, the way that happens in China? I think people need to wake up to it.
Definitely. Like again, it's probably an extreme view, but China is one of the most efficiently run countries in the world. And leaders don't really care about the people. They don't care about the masses. But monetary efficiency is a big pulling power for people at the top. And the people at the top are the people that are calling the shots, Paul. Yeah. Simple as that.
It's frightening. Well, Andy, we'll leave it there, mate. I know you've got to go. That was a great chat, mate. And, well, hopefully I'll get that edited up, that sort of wee technical glitch we got, and we'll get the conversation going. That was brilliant, mate. I really enjoyed that, and maybe do it again.
Thanks for having me on, Paul.
Okay, mate. Thank you very much, buddy. Speak to you soon.